Hi everybody, how's it going? East River G3 here. I wanted to do a video today talking about my favorite N64 games. Now, I've done a video before where I'm on camera and I'm talking about my N64 memories, and I honestly made it quite a while ago, so I don't remember all of it, but it was basically how I got into the N64 and some of my favorite memories associated with it. But I don't think I really talked about my favorite games in depth, and I really wanted to do that today, and I thought that a audio version would be the most appropriate. I don't know, it just kind of worked for me, so hopefully this is okay for you. But I wanted to talk about a little more in depth with my N64 memories, my favorite games, and some games I've gotten into recently with it. This is a system that is so near and dear to my heart. I mean, it is my favorite system, and it brings me so many good memories and so much joy. And honestly, it is as silly as it sounds, my happy place, because my best memories, honestly, in life are playing the N64. And whenever I play some of these games that I played as a youngster, it really brings back those just comforting memories. And finding these new games today and having this system live on, basically, it's a wonderful thing for me. So I want to talk first about how I got on into the N64 and some of my early memories regarding it. Hopefully that this video, this whole kind of podcast kind of deal, can speak to you perhaps, and you can share some of these memories with me. I'd love to hear from you. As I always say, this is kind of why I make videos. I like to hear from you folks and share some thoughts. So I'll break this up into parts, so that you can listen to it and you don't have to, kind of scroll through. You can just kind of hear what you want to hear or whatever. But let's start talking about when I first got the N64 as a console. So I think it was probably 1997 when I first got this console. It might have been 1998, but I think it was 1997. And I remember getting this for Christmas. I got this console. It came with the gray N64 controller, the atomic purple controller, and it also came with a copy of Diddy Kong Racing. So the first N64 game that I played was Diddy Kong Racing. I remember a year before, my brother was playing Mario 64 when the console first came out. And, if you're of my age or, and grew up in the 90s, when the N64 came out, it was kind of mind-blowing. It was a mind-blowing time because we took the jump from 2D to 3D, and it was pretty insane. It's kind of a jump that we don't ever get anymore with consoles. Now, of course, the PlayStation came out before the N64, but a lot of early PlayStation games were kind of 2D with like 2.5D sprites and stuff. So while that came out before, I really think it was like Mario 64 and even in 1998, like Ocarina of Time, that like blew people's minds. So I remember my brother playing a Mario 64, and like he borrowed the console from someone and was like screaming in the basement because he was just like freaking out over like what was possible back then. You know what I mean? Like we played Genesis games and stuff when we were like really young, and so that was pretty crazy. That was like my first total experience with it. But then in 1997 or 98, I can't remember which year it was, but I got that, I got one for Christmas. And I got Diddy Kong Racing. So, how it was back then, there was really no internet, really. There was no like going to review sites and whatever. It was just you get what you get and you play it until you play it. And Diddy Kong Racing was my first game, and I played the hell out of that. I was a young kid for sure, but and that's a hard game even today, honestly. I mean, I've played that game many times, and it still gives me a lot of trouble. But me and my brother both played that game to hell, and I loved it. It was, I didn't have any experience with Mario Kart, mind you. A lot of people list Mario Kart 64 as like their favorite kart racer. I had no experience with that game. I had no experience with Crash Team Racing, which I've played today, and I think is an outstanding game. I think that's probably better than both of them, really. But I don't know, Diddy Kong 64. I loved the kart racing aspect. It was a lot of fun, the items. I loved the whole adventure mode aspect of it, that you weren't just racing tracks. There was like this little story to it. And back in the day, like when you would get a instruction manual, which really doesn't exist anymore, they would write little stories in the instruction manual to make up for the lack of story in a game. And it was just a lot of fun for me. And I think that was the very first game where I got hooked into Rareware, now called Rare, but back in the day it was Rareware. And their style, their cartoony British humor, kind of cheeky style. I don't know how to describe it. I'm still the biggest Rareware fan. You know, they're my favorite game company, and most of these games are going to be Rareware games. But that, I mean, I had no other experience. You know, it wasn't like I got into them over a period of time. It was just Diddy Kong Racing, and I was hooked on their style at the age of like 5 or 6 years old. I mean, I was sold on it. And I played the hell out of that game. The next game I got was, I want to say it was probably BanjoTooie. No, I'm going to step back. Sorry, it wasn't BanjoTooie. We'll get there. Donkey Kong 64. Now, a lot of people hate this game, and I get it, because the 3D collectathon platformer was very popular back in the day, but Donkey Kong 64 is the game that went overboard with it. Rareware just took it to the next level with so many collectibles, and there was so much backtracking and all of this stuff. And people didn't really like it, and they still don't really like it. And I totally understand why. But I'll tell you, the first 3D collectathon platform I played was BanjoKazooie, which I'm sure a lot of people love. I mean, most people love that game. I went over to my buddy's house when I was like 5 or 6 years old, and I played that game, and I loved it. You know, again, it was the Rareware charm that hooked me in. Something about it that I just couldn't get enough of it at that age, and still today. And I loved it. I loved the gameplay flow and everything. So I was like, man, I want to get one of these. So he's like, oh, I also have Donkey Kong 64. I don't think we knew that they were made by the same people back then, but he showed me that, and I loved that. So I ended up buying it. And there was a little funny story. I got it for like my birthday or something. You know, back in the day, you only got like 1 or 2 games a year. You got like a game for Christmas, a game for your birthday. That was pretty much it. Whatever you got, you played the hell out of, you know. And I remember not having the expansion pack, so I couldn't play the game. And it was like, you know, as a young kid, it was like one of the most devastating things on my birthday or whatever, not being able to play it. Eventually, we finally got an expansion pack, and I played it. And while, again, most people don't like that game because how extreme it is, it's probably the most extreme example there is of a 3D collectathon platformer. There is something about that collectathon platformer flow that works with me as a person. And I don't know what it is, if it's something to do with my personality. I have quite an odd personality, and I don't know. The flow of the game, the collecting of multiple things, the cataloging of all these items works for me. And while some people think it's extreme, and I get it, that collectathon platformer thing is like my favorite thing in a game, and my cat's meowing in the background, just so you know. But being that it's an extreme example, again, I know I'm reiterating myself. To some people, that's like the overboard variant of it. To me, that's the perfect example of it. For some reason, it works perfectly for me. So Donkey Kong 64, when I got that and played it, was the creme de la creme of 3D platformers. Being the most extreme example, worked perfectly for my personality. And to this day, it's probably one of my favorite games. I just love the catalog of it. And while, again, it might drive some people crazy, to me, it's like a happy place. It calms me down for some reason. The extreme collecting aspects of that game make me feel calm and make me feel organized and make me feel like everything's okay in the world for some reason. So that was such a great memory, and I still play that game. And while it is frustrating, there are some moments in it that are completely unbalanced and almost impossible. It just makes me feel like everything's okay around me. So I love that game. I'll never get tired of that game. The next game I wanted to talk about is BanjoTooie, not BanjoKazooie. Now, I love BanjoKazooie, and I've played it a number of times, and it's a great game. And, you know, I love platformers and the rare charm and everything, so of course I love that one. But, you know, I mentioned that was the first, I played that at my buddy's house or whatever. And so after playing Donkey Kong 64, and then I went to Blockbuster and I was renting a game, and I saw BanjoTooie. Not BanjoKazooie, but BanjoTooie. This is the year 2000, I believe. So I picked it up. And BanjoTooie, again, is a game that people tend to like less than the original because, again, like Donkey Kong 64, they went a little bit overboard with things. The worlds were too big. There was too much to collect. There was too much backtracking. And again, like Donkey Kong 64, for some reason with my brain and my personality and everything, that calms me down. That thing that would drive most people insane, all this cataloging of items and backtracking and this and that, makes me feel so calm. So BanjoTooie, again, is like a perfect game for me. And it was the first BanjoKazooie game I really played myself. And I remember picking it up, and of course there was a save file already on the cartridge, and they got to the third world, Witchy World, which is like a theme park world, and as a young kid I thought that was amazing, and I really dug it, and I played the hell out of it, and it filled me with wonder and charm and colors and lights and all this stimuli, and I regrettably returned it at the end of the time, and I eventually picked it up and played through it, and it just, very much like Donkey Kong 64, it just filled me with such calm and happiness. And, you know, I've played it multiple times. I picked it up when it was on Xbox 360, and I own it now, and I've owned it on N64 and blah, blah, blah. You know, I've played it in so many iterations, and again, it's just a game that for some reason, while this might be a type of game that's a little too much to some people, it's the opposite effect on me. It just brings such a peace to me and such a calm, and there's something about the charm of Rareware and their style and the flow of the game that just makes me feel so happy. You know, it's really a happy place for me. Donkey Kong 64, Diddy Kong Racing, BanjoTooie. If I could pick 3 games that really just bring me to my happy place, it would be those 3 games. It just brings me so much joy, and I simply never get tired of it. I really don't, and I will tell you, I haven't played BanjoTooie in a number of years, and I'm going to be playing it somewhat soon, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be a wonderful time. And the next game that, you know, these are basically 5 games that are, you know, my most treasured N64 games as a child. Mario Party 2 is the next one, and I think that that's one of the few I'm going to mention that's not like, that's actually kind of in the majority opinion. I think most people prefer Mario Party 2 of the 3 original N64 ones. That was the one I just simply played. I would go over to my cousin's house as a kid, and I would spend the weekend there. And he had an N64 as well. I remember it was so cool. He had the green controller. It was different than mine. And I would always pick that one to play with. And he had Mario Party 2. And I loved that game as well. It was such a fun flow of a game. It was just a fun board game style mini games, all that. It was great. I love that game. And as I got older, and I still feel this way, I think my favorite is Mario Party 2. I've played them all, and I own them all, and they're really fun. Mario Party 1 is the most rugged of them all. It lacks a lot of polish that you would expect. So going from 2 to 1 is a little bit of rough around the edges, but I still do it when I want a change of boards. And 2 is just the perfect balance. 3 is also great, but they went a little overboard, I think, with how many items you can have. It can turn the game kind of crazy, but I still go back to Mario Party 2, and really because of the memories of that one. So that's Mario Party 2. And the last of the games here that are just my absolute favorite N64 games, the best memories possible, would be Majora's Mask. Not Ocarina of Time, surprisingly. I mean, people love Majora's Mask, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying like this is a hidden gem or a sleeper hit. Everyone loves Majora's Mask, but, you know, it was the first one I played. Ocarina of Time came out in 1998, and again, I remember, you know, I had an N64, but for some reason I didn't play it. I remember seeing my brother playing it, and that's another game where it did come out a couple years after the N64, so we had gotten used to the 3D aspect of games. But I feel like that was, again, another revolutionary game that blew people's minds on what games could be back in the day. And I remember going to a flea market and with like my uncle or something, and I saw the holographic copy of Majora's Mask there, and I picked it up for like $3, which is something you could never do today. But I picked it up for like $3. I'll never forget that. Well, my uncle picked it up for me. I was a young kid at the time, but picked it up and I brought it home, and my brother nearly passed out when he saw what I brought home for how cheap I brought it home. And we played that game, and we played that game till the cows came home. I mean, we played it until the night. I remember playing that game. I remember eating our dinner up in our room playing that. It was such a special time, and I loved that game. I loved it. And I did go and play Ocarina of Time on the Wii, the virtual console, and I loved that as well. But Majora's Mask was definitely my favorite. And I still feel that way. And, of course, the memories, this is my whole running theme of this video is the memories. But I think even besides that, I'm a horror movie fan, and I like dark things. And that game has such a dark tone to it. And horror aspects for sure, but just a very dark, brooding tone to it that really, even as a young kid, I think that came out in 2000, so I was probably 7 years old when I played that. Even as a 7-year-old, that dark kind of feel spoke to me. And the Ocarina of Time, still today, if I could choose between the Majora's Mask and Ocarina of Time, I'm sorry I missed the titles there. But yeah, definitely Majora's Mask. The feel of that game brings something that is unparalleled. And really anything I've played, there's no game like that really to me today. No Zelda game has come close to that. Twilight Princess got there a little bit, but Breath of the Wild is a totally different beast. But Majora's Mask is just something unparalleled for me. So it's definitely my favorite Zelda game and continues to be, and will never really, I don't think is ever really going to pull that away from me. So, these are some games that I've really found now that I have been playing N64 more proactively that I didn't really play when I was younger. Some of these I actually did play, because with Blockbuster, we all went to Blockbuster back in the day, so I rented some of these. But I really have them now, and I'll tell you, I actually own an N64, and I have an Everdrive cart. If you're not familiar with what an Everdrive is, it's basically an N64 cart with an SD card slot in it. And so you can load the ROMs of N64 games onto that SD card, put them into the cartridge, and play them right on a real N64. So it's not emulation. You're actually really playing these games on an N64. No emulation. I'm okay with emulation. Now, I don't want you to mistake what I'm saying. In fact, I'm pretty pro emulation because I think that, most of these games that are out now are pretty much, I'm not even going to delve into retro game things now. I was really big into retro game collecting back in the mid 2000s, even up until 2010, 11, 12. I had a Super Nintendo and Nintendo. I had a Genesis. I collected all these cartridges, and then it just got insane. I think we all know that, and it just gets worse and worse. I don't even really keep up with it anymore, to be frank with you. There are games that aren't even really good, that are just and they're so expensive. They're more expensive than a modern game, and it's just an insane thing. And I'm away from that, so I emulate often. The only console that I really don't work well with emulating is N64, and it's not because it's my favorite console. I would totally emulate it, but I just find it's hard to very accurately emulate N64. There are some cores that can do it very well, but my computer processing power doesn't do it well. So I found that, hey, it's a particularly difficult thing to emulate very well. There's a lot of issues. It's also my favorite console. I might as well get a real one. And then I picked up an Everdrive, and I suggest getting an Everdrive with every damn console you have, because I can play any game, any N64. I have every N64 game ever made, including Japanese releases. I have mods, I have hacks, I have games that were not ever released. It's the way to go. I can play things that you would never be able to play. So that's what I do now, and it's just been a wonderful thing of trying new things out and watching a lot of YouTube videos and learning about different things. So I'm going to read you here some games that I've been playing recently, that some of them I might have played as a kid once or twice, but they're really I'm not saying hidden gems or anything like that, trademark, but they're just games that I never played that I'm playing now and I'm really enjoying as an adult. So the first would be Forsaken 64, which I did actually pick up when I was younger at Blockbuster. It has a very weird cover, if you're familiar with this game. The cover is this model with a teardrop or a heart tattoo. The cover is very strange. It has nothing to do with the game. It's basically a 360 shooter. You're in a I don't know, a little robot thing that can move 360 degrees and you go around and shoot stuff. And it's pretty basic, but it's actually a lot of fun, and it controls very well and it plays very well. I believe it was on PS1 as well, and it's also on PC now. You can get it. But I do remember picking that up. I do remember picking it up when I got back into collecting as an adult, and I remember getting it for $2. I'm sure it's not $2 anymore, but that was a lot of fun. Another one that I picked up when I was at Blockbuster when I was a kid was Indiana Jones and the Infernal Machine, which was a game that I think I was a little too young to quite understand, or I was struggling with it as a kid. But now that I've picked it up as an adult, it's actually quite a good game. It's basically the N64's answer to Tomb Raider, and it really just plays like a Tomb Raider game, which is great. And I love Indiana Jones, so it's a great Tomb Raider style game with Indiana Jones coat of paint on it. None of these games are perfect because they're older games, but I think it's a lot of fun. It's a very long game, which is not really the case with a lot of N64 games. It's a pretty substantial adventure, 15 to 20 hours worth of your time. It's not a game you can buy very easily. I mean, that goes without saying with a lot of N64 games. Are very expensive now. This game particularly, because I think it was a Blockbuster exclusive. So I'm not even going to attempt to like buy a cartridge of this, but I have it on my Everdrive, and it's a very fun game, and I suggest it. It's great. And the next one would be a game that I never picked up as a kid, but I recently got into, is Beetle Adventure Racing. Back when I was collecting N64 games in like 2010 to 12, around that time, a lot of people recommended Beetle Adventure Racing as a fun racer, and it was very cheap back then. It was like $2, $5, $10, in that range, very cheap. And I never bought it because I was like, I don't really I like kart racers, but not racers too much. So I never got it. I don't know how much it is now. It's probably like $150 or whatever. But I decided, I got my Everdrive, I can try anything. So I played it, and I get why people like it, because it's not a kart racer, but it's more of an arcadey style racer. You just drive around in Beetles, but the tracks, there's only like 5 or 6 tracks in the game, but they're huge. They take like 7 minutes to race through, and there's all these shortcuts. You remember shortcuts back in the day were great on racing games, and there's so many good shortcuts, and it's just such a good game. You can play through it. I've only, to be frank with you, I've only played through like 1 or 2 tracks in this game, and I've gotten that much enjoyment out of 1 or 2 tracks. They're that good. There's so many variety in the game. It's a wonderful racer. If I want to play a racer and I don't know what to play, I will pick Beetle Adventure Racing, because it's going to bring me a lot of joy. It controls well. It looks pretty good, and it's a ton of fun. And to be honest with you, I could play that first track. I don't remember what it's called, Coventry Cove or something like that. I could play that first track over and over and not really get sick of it, but there's 5 other tracks in the game I really haven't explored. So that's an outstanding racer. I wish I got into it sooner, but hey, as a 30-year-old guy, it's cool to play that game now. And the next game that I really got into that probably a lot of people played, it was one of the first games that came out, is Wave Race. I never played Wave Race. Everyone always suggested it. I never got into it. I don't know why. I picked Wave Race up. I didn't pick it up. I played on my Everdrive, and recently, within the past 6 months, and I love it. It has very ahead of its time water physics, and people had said that, and I thought, cool. But no, really, I didn't, it looks dated, of course, all of this looks dated, but physics-wise, nothing really was like, oh, this is a little janky feeling, it feels a little old school. It doesn't. It feels like a modern racing game. The water physics are very good. That's impressive. I don't see shit like that nowadays. I really don't. The physics feel about on par with what I would expect from a modern game. And Wave Race is a game that's great to play with friends. It's great to play by yourself. It's one of those games that's very easy to pick up and play with everyone, and it's very difficult to master. It's a great speedrunning game. I got into the speedrunning scene, and I was trying to do the time trials. It's one of those games you can get crazily into with improving your times and things like that. And it's a very tech-heavy game. But it's a great game where it doesn't have to be a tech-heavy game, but it can be if you want it to. So that's why I love Wave Race 64, man. And the last one of the games that I've been playing recently that I never played that I want to get into is Conker's Bad Fur Day, another Rareware game. Plenty of people know this one. It's a great game. I never played it as a kid. I actually rented it from Blockbuster, and brought it home, and my mom realized it was an M-rated game and there was some profanity and stuff in it, so she took it away from me, and we brought it back. And I was like, oh, that sucks. Because we didn't know at the time. We just figured, oh, Rareware, it's like Conker from Diddy Kong Racing. That's what we thought. But I never actually had a chance to play this because, as I said before, like I never could get N64 emulators to work properly on my computers growing up and stuff like that. And this is one, specifically Conker's always had frame rate issues. And of course, it's not great on a real N64, but it works works just fine. So I've been playing this one, and this is a great game, man, and it's got the Rareware charm, but it's a little bit different. Of course, it's mature. It's got very raunchy humor in it, and it probably pushes the limits for what would be acceptable today. But that's kind of up my alley. I like raunchy stuff. But I think that people have mentioned this is a game that you experience, you don't really play. And when I started playing it, I realized that like it's not a 3D collectathon platformer like I was expecting. It is a platformer. It does have the same bones as all of Rareware's platformers, but you don't really go around and collect tons of items like you do in BanjoKazooie or Donkey Kong 64 or whatever. You just kind of like the mechanics of the platforming is there, but you really just kind of go through the game for the story and the humor, and it's really damn funny. And I just like it. You really just play it for the story and the humor. You just go through it and you have a laugh, and it's really funny. It's raunchy toilet humor, and I love it. So that's basically all I have to say, man. Those are the games that I grew up just adoring, and those are the games I've been playing recently that have been great. I mean, I've been playing the Master Quest version of Ocarina of Time, which I never had a chance to play, and I like that a lot. And which was a GameCube game, but I can play it on my N64 because of my Everdrive. And I have some other stuff, like I have a hack of a very, very, very good ROM hack that somebody made that is basically a game that goes in between Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask, and it's a full-fledged adventure of Ocarina of Time. Very cool. Stuff like that. So this console is very near and dear to my heart. There's plenty of other games. I've mentioned them on my channel before. If you want to go back and look at maybe some of my older N64 reviews, but man, I don't get enough of this. I don't know. It's a janky console, and I admit that, and I understand that, but nothing brings me the joy that this console does, There's only a few other games that I've played on other consoles that really bring me the level of comfort and satisfaction that this console does. And I don't even know if I can think of anything off my head. The only other game I can think of that brings me this level of comfort is BioShock, which is kind of funny because it's not quite a comforting game, but it does bring me that level of comfort, that these do. So that's that, and I hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know what your thoughts are, if you have any cool memories. I hope this was useful or fun to listen to, and I hope you have a great day. See you later.